In some dire cases, the only financial right they believe they have is to their mahr.
You might have gotten a civil divorce, but you're still married to him because he hasn't pronounced the talaq. So some of these women were sort of stuck in limbo, or what they're called limping marriages. Because of these large deferred amounts, it actually impacts women and their ability to decide whether or not they want to stay in the marriage. There's almost like a financial incentive to stay in the marriage, which is not the intention.
Yet Islam, as a deen that was preached by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, was pioneering the way in establishing financial rights for women long before other civilizations did. So what happened? Now, how did we lose sight of these foundational principles? Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and welcome to the Guided Ledger podcast. I'm your host Remy, and today's topic is Beyond the Mahr, reclaiming the Muslim woman's financial literacy and inclusion. Why this topic? Because financial inclusion and literacy is a right for everyone. Yet today, in this modern day and age, we find that some Muslim women face particular cultural dynamics that influence their financial security, their literacy, and active participation. Now, and in some dire cases, the only financial right they believe they have is to their mahr. Yet Islam, as a deen that was preached by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, was pioneering the way in establishing financial rights for women long before other civilizations did. This includes the right to inheritance, the right to complete ownership of their own financial assets, representing themselves wholly in contractual relationships and trade. So what happened? Now, how did we lose sight of these foundational principles? To help us navigate through this discussion, we have Dr. Anisa Buckley. Dr. Anisa Buckley is an Islamic finance broker, researcher, and advocate with a truly unique background. She is a seasoned academic who has dedicated her career to the intersection of Islamic jurisprudence, women's rights, and the experiences of Muslim minorities in Western contexts. Now, she's earned a PhD in Islamic Studies from the University of Melbourne, where her research explored the intricacies of religious divorce procedures, Islamic family laws, and the lived experiences of Muslim women in Australia. Dr. Anisa now wears multiple hats, if that wasn't enough. She's an authorized credit representative in Amanah Islamic Finance, where she works with families to obtain Sharia-compliant home financing. This role in Islamic finance is complemented by over a decade of research and advocacy. Let's read it. She's held research positions at Monash University, Western Sydney University, and the University of Melbourne, contributing to studies on Islamic banking, finance, and family law. Now, here's the piece of icing on the cake. Notably, she has served in leadership roles such as co-chairing the Australian Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights and acting as a founding board member of Islamic Museum of Australia. MashaAllah. What does this all mean? Dr. Anisa brings a powerful blend of scholarly insight and practical experience. She's deeply committed to her community, advocating for Muslim women's rights, educating others, and now directly empowering families through ethical financial services. In short, she's the perfect guide for today's conversation. Dr. Anisa, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you so much.
Jazakallah for joining us today.
It's such an honor to be here.
Alhamdulillah. Now, your PhD thesis, let's start with that because that's one of a kind. The topic was Muslim women, law, and the challenges in securing a complete divorce, the Australian experience. Can you tell us more about this research? How did it come about? What inspired it? And what did you find?
Yeah, look, I think it was this idea that, I could see in the community growing up that, divorce was becoming more common, but it was still something that people didn't want to really talk about. It was still something that was quite taboo, and in some cases it was almost sort of something that families were a bit embarrassed to share, or it was something that people would say, oh okay, you're getting divorced, in like a like a pitying kind of way, which for obviously it's not something that's ideal, but in some situations it needs to happen, and that is why in our deen that we have that option to be able to, pursue, a divorce, or to be able to, end a relationship that is not working out for both parties. But there was not much, information and studies done out there about the experiences of women or the impacts that these have, and particularly in Australia, where we have the Islamic divorce process, which is a separate process to the civil divorce process. In my research, I looked at how women determined for themselves that they were considered completely divorced because of this dual process of the civil laws and the Islamic laws. Because a lot of times women were being given different opinions about, oh, well, no, that actually your divorce wasn't valid, or no, you're still married to him because he hasn't pronounced the talaq, you might have gotten a civil divorce. So some of these women were sort of stuck in limbo, or what they called limping marriages. And in addition to that, there were lots of issues with the Mahr, as you mentioned earlier, that can impact the way in which Muslim women get what they're entitled to.
So following from that, from your work with the community and your research, this whole ordeal of divorce, where does that leave Muslim women financially?
So in many cases, unfortunately, as I mentioned, the biggest issue with women in divorce, on top of, say, for example, that it might be the Islamic process might be quite a long, drawn out process, mainly because of husbands not wanting to, meet the imams, husbands not wanting to, agree to the divorce. They may, agree to the civil divorce process, but then feel that they can still somehow control the Islamic divorce process. And so they'll try to just, obfuscate it and kind of create problems and so on. But on top of just the actual granting the divorce, the Mahr aspect was quite a big part of that issues in terms of how women found themselves financially. So, for example, in some communities, mainly in Australia, in Lebanese communities, they have a practice of splitting the Mahr into two parts, which is the Mahr Muqaddam and the Mahr Mu'akhar, which is like the immediate Mahr at the time of marriage. And then there's what's called a deferred Mahr that is granted at the time of divorce or death. So for some women, I guess the concept behind it, and this is mostly in, for example, Hanafi fiqh, is that it grants the women some kind of economic security if she's left, the husband divorces her, or he passes away, and so therefore she has some kind of security after that. The issue with what happens these days is that for some of the some members of the community, they make the Mahr Mu'akhar a really large amount. Like tens of thousands.
Or which side makes it really large?
So this is the husband's side, because the husband's the one that grants the Mu'akhar. It could be also the women's side asking for a large Mahr as well. That's definitely a case there of families wanting this large amount. So it almost, but the thing is with divorce in Islamic family laws, it's the idea is that the Mahr is a shart of the marriage contract, and there's no minimum or maximum amounts. There's the example of a woman, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, who wanted to set like a maximum amount of Mahr, and a woman stood up and said, you cannot, how can you, set a maximum for anything that the Prophet did not set? And he said, yes, you're right. So even at the time of the Prophet there were these sort of large amounts of Mahr. And again, that's something that needs to be, arranged between the two families. But even at the time of marriage, sometimes it starts creating some, some issues. But yeah, some tension, some kind of, with the sort of like the toing and froing and for, for example, in Muslim communities, we like to support, young couples. We like them to be able to, if they find the right person, to get married as soon as possible, not necessarily delay it. And so, but, the way in which, we live in today, the community and the society that we live in today, having a lot of money at the time of, say, 25 for young men, they're probably just starting work. They don't have a huge amount of finances already accumulated. And so the deferred mahr is almost like a way for them to just build up that financial kind of base. But it also can be used as a way of like showing how well off or how gracious or how supportive the husband, will be, and promising like very large amounts. And, like I said, in the tens of thousands of dollars. So what happens at the time of divorce is, under Islamic family laws, is that whoever initiates the divorce essentially, forfeits the mahr. So if a woman initiates the divorce under khula, then she would need to return that mahr because, it's her choice, perhaps something that she, is, for whatever reason, is at fault. But she wants to initiate the divorce and says, I want to leave the marriage. And so she needs to return that. So if there's a very large amount of deferred mahr, then she basically forfeits that. She doesn't get that. And so the husband keeps it. If it was a small mahr, then she could pay it back or, but because of these large deferred amounts, it actually impacts women and their ability to decide whether or not they want to stay in the marriage because of this almost like a financial incentive to stay in the marriage, which is not the intention, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ. It was the intention there was to help women who, as a gift initially, as a gift, as a sense of, a generous gift from, the husband to the wife. And again, no sort of minimum or maximum amounts. And now it has sort of become this sort of financial stress point for men as well. So for men as well, they are then also not willing to perhaps divorce their wife because then they will have to pay that amount to them. So it almost sort of takes over in making that decision process, which, can create a situation where people stay in a marriage that they really is not beneficial to either of them or to their children.
And that when the amount is deferred, so if couple A get divorced through khula, where it was initiated by the woman, does she, I just want to get my understanding right, does she have to pay the deferred? Obviously not, because it hasn't been given to her, right? But she would just lose that opportunity to have it should a death or divorce happen. So she's probably thinking, maybe I should just wait for him to divorce me so that I actually get that deferred payment.
And also sometimes in some of the cases that women that I interviewed, the husbands would make life so hard for women that even though it's not any fault on behalf of the woman, that she would go to the imams and say, look, he's not looking after me. He's not there. All the reasons why she should be allowed to have a valid divorce. But he's refusing to give talaq because he will have to pay me this mahr. So, and then sometimes the imams, they prefer to do the talaq because it's just easier and more straightforward. They don't have to go backwards and forwards. And so a lot of the imams would say, look, just do the khula, and then, I'm sorry, you'll just have to, but you get your freedom. You know what I mean? And for some women, the freedom is more important to them than that money. So, while the mahr initially, was supposed to be something that provided women with some financial benefit, it actually, if it's not, managed in the right way, or, practices now over time have become to the point where it actually can cause, interference in making those kind of rational decisions about the relationship. Just another thing I wanted to say about the imams as well is even those who do try to, ask the husbands to give them that deferred mahr, or they have no enforceable powers, unfortunately. And, they're under a lot of pressure in the community to try and resolve it rather than kind of, make this divorce happen. But a lot of the imams are more aware now about, various factors that lead to, valid reasons for a divorce. Obviously in the past it was more about like the physical abuse, but now they're becoming more aware about financial abuse, emotional abuse, about all these sort of subtle things, even drug and alcohol abuse. In the past, imams just were like, no, that doesn't happen in our community. But now they're undergoing more training and awareness about the fact that, yes, unfortunately, these things do happen in our community. There is another form, other forms of divorce, not just talaq and khula. There's also a tafriq, which is kind of like a judge mandated divorce, where there's the mahr kind of does not have to be involved. It's just wherever you're at, you can just have, and that is something that in Sharia courts around the world, in Muslim countries, the judge is the one who makes that decision. But because a lot of imams feel that, that requires having to go through, and make, kind of get to know the parties, and they're so under, so much work already, and so much community, they're just inundated with so many, community issues that they feel that either a khula or a talaq are just the sort of the easiest and more straightforward ways to go about it. But there are definitely other ways that women can get a divorce without, having that mahr issue come in.
I didn't even know that. Jazakallah for sharing that. See, that's the thing. Like here, we're learning there are different ways of divorce. Does that come under where you haven't seen your husband for 4 months kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, different schools of thought would have different guidelines about that. I think in the traditional Hanafi fiqh, like in terms of looking at the actual fiqh books, for some women, if they were deserted for up to 99 years, they would. So for Hanafi women back then, but there's definitely been a lot of ijtihad, a lot of, Islamic family courts, Sharia courts around the world have, made adaptations. They've taken from, other schools of thought to be able to try to, create, follow maslaha, follow this sense of, community benefit, and try to think about what is the best situation, in today's society. So lots of different Muslim countries have kind of done what is called talfiq. They kind of take, different opinions from other schools that they feel is actually beneficial at this, point in time. So there is actually, I just wanted to mention that there's one case of where mahr was, usually mahr is not something that is part of the Australian court system because it's just an agreement between the two parties. But there was one case in 2012 between a Muslim couple here in Australia, which sets a very important precedent. And she had a deferred mahr of $50,000.
MashaAllah.
And so her husband essentially ended the marriage, and she said, look, I deserve that amount. You ended the marriage, and that's part of the contract. Now, why it was actually recognized in Australian courts is because they both had a proper marriage contract that was drawn up by lawyers, which so they both had, and that was considered, even though interestingly they were not registered under they had not registered their civil marriage. They hadn't gone through the marriage, birth, deaths and marriages registry. They had only done it with an imam. But because they had lawyers involved in writing up this contract, this marriage contract, because there was a significant amount, of money involved, it was recognized as a formal contract under the Australian courts, and it was enforced. And she got her $50,000.
I think you're going to get a lot of hate from the brothers from this. Oh, we didn't.
Obviously, that she had that foresight to say, look, I would like to have this, marriage contract drawn up properly, so that way it fits under Australian laws. And these are binding financial agreements. Not all Muslims do this. Most Muslims, if they're lucky, they might get some kind of filled out form from the imam to show if they are doing just an Islamic marriage. Obviously, if they do the registered marriage, they get a certificate of marriage. But it is something that I think for women, if you're talking about maybe this is going into the safeguards question, perhaps.
Yeah. So, in your opinion, that's pretty heavy right there because I feel like there's a lot of aspects of getting married as a Muslim in Australia that we just don't consider. For example, Islamic marriage versus civil marriage, and then what rights am I actually foregoing if I choose just Islamic marriage, for example. So, in your opinion, after looking at all this and interviewing all these women, what are some realistic systems that we can put into place to better safeguard the financial rights of a woman, in the case of divorce?
So one thing that I did talk about in my PhD was this idea. Again, this is another form of divorce that women can have access to. It's called the talaq tafwid. So in addition to this tafriq, which is the sort of judge mandated divorce where they make a decision, they hear both parties, it is a condition that she can put in her marriage contract. And the Board of Imams Victoria has it on their standard marriage contract. I'm not sure how many other, boards of imams around Australia have it as of yet, but I definitely know that the Board of Imams has it in theirs. And essentially it is a process whereby the husband agrees to delegate, which means he grants his wife the same rights of talaq. So if she wants to get divorced, she will, and again, the way in which this actually happens can vary depending on the imam and the school of thought. And some schools are more supportive of this than others. But in terms of just being able to, again, it doesn't involve any transfer of the mahr. It means that she is still, she keeps the mahr that she receives at the time of marriage, and she can essentially pronounce talaq because her husband has granted her that power. Now, some people have had the opinion that it means he loses his power, but it's just a delegation. He still has his ability to pronounce talaq. He just grants her that same ability. And that makes the process, it doesn't involve any kind of who's at fault, looking at, well, why, and, going into all the sort of the questions and having to provide justifications and evidence. It is something that if she would like to do that, she can go and pronounce that. And again, depending on the imam, and the Board of Imams would have, the guidelines for that. But the fact that it's mentioned there in the marriage contract is something that in lots of other Muslim countries, they are incorporating that as well as a standard practice, because it essentially makes it a no-fault process, which is very similar to so the talaq is a no-fault process. The tafriq, which is the judge-mandated one, it's a slightly fault process, but the judge makes that decision. The khula is a very it's supposed to be a no-fault process, but a lot of women in the end, when they go to the imam, they feel like they have to provide evidence. Even though technically it's supposed to be a no-fault process. But the thing with the khula is that a woman usually has to have her husband's consent. So it has to be almost like a mutual divorce.
Because he has to be there, right? He has to attend that session with the imams.
Yes. And so, and even if he's not there, the imams would say, oh, if you want to pursue a khula, then you will need to get your husband's permission, or we need to be able to get from him that he actually agrees to this.
Yep.
For husbands who have left and not able to be contacted, that means that if she only had recourse under khula, that would not be just. So there are all these other, aspects of divorce that women have access to. Another thing that I guess in terms of safeguarding women in divorce is that, for example, imams who in Australia who are registered celebrants often have to wait until the civil divorce is produced by the parties before they can provide the Islamic divorce. Just so that way it is, they can't just go off and get married again, because the Islamic divorce process waiting period, the iddah, is only about 3 months for men. Obviously it's longer if a woman is if she's, pregnant, or if, the husband, it's until she has the baby. But for the Australian, under the civil marriage process, civil divorce process, it's at least 12 months. And so it gives more time for the couple, I guess, to really decide about whether they want to go ahead with this. But also, I think importantly, for any couples who want to, also get married again, it means that the imams who are registered celebrants also need to see some kind of a verification of that if they've been in a previous relationship, that they're actually properly divorced. So, for example, the husband has to show, otherwise he might be coming to them and wanting to get a second wife, maybe with or without the first wife's, permission. So there's a lot of rules now about this imams who are registered celebrants to try and, protect women's rights, both in marriage and in divorce, by being very transparent about their legal status, whether they're, fully married or fully divorced, are they able to get fully married again? That kind of thing. And then another aspect, I guess, is there was a fatwa by the European Council of Fatwa and Research, probably like 15 years ago, which said that, if in countries where there isn't like an option to get an Islamic divorce, that if you've had, a civil marriage and under the laws of that country, if you've registered and you've had a marriage that's registered as legal in the laws of that country, you should go and have, if you recognize the laws for marriage, you should also recognize the laws for divorce, and you should go through the civil divorce process. Now, obviously, since then, Sharia councils, boards of imams, across many Western jurisdictions have grown. They have become, the imams have become, registered celebrants, or in Australia at least. So there's that twining, that intermeshing of the two systems. And so, while that fatwa was for situations where there was no recourse to an Islamic, process, it still has an impact, I guess, on the imams who are registered celebrants, that they do respect the laws of the country and follow those rules.
Yeah, and it gives jurisdiction for them to actually ask those sensitive questions like, okay, now you want to get married. Can I see if you're previously divorced? Have you gone through that civil divorce process properly? That's a perfect way for us to segue into the next question about this research that you co-authored this study comparing marriage laws in Australia and England. And so in Australia, we have a celebrant system where our religious officials, imams, they can also conduct a legally binding marriage. In England, apparently, according to this study that you've co-authored, the law is stricter and it's actually weddings are tied to specific venues. So your study suggests that basically shifting to an efficient-based system like we have in Australia would empower these imams to legally marry couples, and it could then basically have a positive impact to increasing the legal rights of a Muslim woman in marriage and also in divorce. So can you explain how exactly a celebrant system protects the woman more? And do you think this kind of reform could mean that things like property rights and alimony would be more streamlined?
Yep. No, I did the study with Dr. Rajnara Akhtar from the UK. And also another academic here, Dr. Rina Kraham. And so there was a comparison of the two systems. And it was interesting because before that, I kind of had known a little bit about the sort of registered system in England, but this really kind of opened my eyes as to how different it was. So they have like a buildings-based system. So if you want to get married and have your marriage registered, you have to do the ceremony in a particular building that is registered as an authorized place of registration. Now, a lot of mosques in the UK, unfortunately, are not authorized because of this. It's a very kind of, I don't know if it's just designed to make it hard, for perhaps non-Christian faiths, because also Sikhs and others also have the same. So the building cannot be registered if it is a primary form of place of worship. It has to be an adjacent building that is not like a church or a mosque or something. And, most mosques, they don't really have a sort of a separate building that they have, they have a mosque and, even that gets full and they, have to go out on the street for Jummah. So the laws there make it really difficult for mosques to be registered as a place that can conduct a formal ceremony where you can get you registered. So Muslims in the UK essentially need to do two ceremonies. We're here in Australia, we're very lucky. We can get married anywhere, in a house, in a mosque, in the park, in a function center, and if the imam is a registered celebrant, then he can do both at the same time. He can do the official. Again, needing to make sure you have to follow the rules of, giving the 21 days notice. You have to fill out a form and give that notice and everything. So there's some procedures there that in Australia to be able to, fulfill that requirement. And so what happens is, so a lot of Muslims in England then essentially only do a nikah or an Islamic only marriage. So they're not registered under English law. And what we have here, so in addition to the fact that we have a celebrant-based system, in Australia, we also have these de facto laws that recognise non-registered marriages. And they recognise them as valid, marriage-like relationships, as long as, say, for example, you fulfill certain requirements. You've been in the relationship for 2 years. There's you're under the same, in the same house. It's known that you are, so there's a few requirements that you have to fulfill. You have children, that kind of thing. But essentially, we also have this recourse. So they are recognised as official marriage-like relationships, and which means that at the time of separation or divorce, women have entitled to, property settlement and, like you said, maintenance, alimony, that kind of thing. Whereas the Muslims in the UK have no access to this. And so they are considered what's called non-qualifying ceremonies, where the couple's relationship is not accepted. And at the time of divorce, if she wants to, approach the courts or say anything, they would say, well, I'm sorry, but you're not on our records whatsoever, so you get nothing. And so there's been quite a few cases of that's in the literature where it shows how, because of this lack of, because of this procedural aspect of it, that a lot of Muslim women who didn't get that, their marriage registered in a separate ceremony in a separate building that's been, authorized, then she really has no entitlements. So
no protection.
No protection, no entitlements. And any, if she's contributed either to the house or she has done a lot of in-kind contributions through caring responsibilities, she will essentially not be given anything at all. So Dr. Rajnara was she's using that hopefully to try and push for reforms in England to be able to benefit, other communities, religious communities, where to make it easier for them to also, get protections under the law.
And that's the importance of basically having that official recognition of your relationship under the law, isn't it? I previously held the belief that having some sort of formal education would increase the financial literacy of Muslim women. That was my very naive formal belief. And then there's some stats from research conducted by Dr. Mahmoud Nathir from University of South Australia. And I quote, Muslim women across Australia ranked lower in financial literacy competency than their Muslim male counterparts, despite having higher average education levels. More so, women were almost twice as disinclined to seek financial advice than men, with 39.4% of them never having sought financial advice versus only 21.5% of their male counterparts. Clearly, higher education is not the determining factor of whether or not financial literacy is sought even or improved in a Muslim woman. What are the potential factors that are contributing to this?
I think, first of all, we're raised in communities and we have this perception in Muslim families that, okay, yes, the husband is the main he's supposed to be the main provider, the main financial provider. So a lot of the responsibilities and, essentially the stress of, providing for his wife, his family, the children, sometimes even his parents, he's the one that has to bear that burden. And so for a lot of, families, they have kind of, hasn't been at the forefront of a lot of women's minds, perhaps, to think about how to, what to do with the money that you have. For Muslim women, we know that, we're entitled to any money that we have, we can keep for ourselves. how that works out in practical, ways, it could be very different. Muslim women probably do contribute a lot. They probably help contribute to, running the house financially, as well as, contributing to all aspects of, looking after the kids in terms of schooling and, helping with groceries. They will need, with cost of living crisis, many households have had to go to a, double income situation to be able to help, just manage the costs of raising a family. So I guess while women are often very much involved in the day-to-day aspects, either the, paying the bills, making sure all the, the groceries, we might be across, say, a home budget, or we might be across, some of us might be doing taxes, some of us might be, doing those kind of things. It's more those big ticket items in terms of investments and, purchasing a house, or, thinking about like those very large kind of commitments, financial commitments, or how to really grow the wealth rather than not just saving, that we're not, I guess, socialized to think about, because it's like, well, it's not your worry. You don't have to think about that. Your priority is just raising the kids. But then again, like I said, because, maybe women will need to contribute their finances, they should also have a say and be involved in decisions about, okay, is my income, is my wealth going to contribute to this to help the family as a whole? And if so, I also should be informed about it. A lot of women perhaps will be like, oh, well, maybe my husband knows a bit more about this, so I trust him. And while that might be, good, if you have that good relationship, you trust, it's always a good idea to really try to learn things yourself, to be able to contribute in a way, to sort of think, okay, well, maybe is this suburb good? Or maybe that, suburb might have a higher growth area, or is this a risky investment if you want to put money, both our money into something? And we have had, unfortunately, some very sad, examples of Muslim investment, schemes that have fallen through, which, a lot of people in the community have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it's about like, and as we'll go into, I guess, women have certain skills in, risk taking that they can bring to the table. Yeah. And again, if a woman, for example, there's a death in the family, or the husband says, okay, but I'm not part of this relationship anymore, I'm going, then she is going to have to take on that financial responsibility. And then she's thrown into that situation and having to kind of have all of that. So it's not, I guess, the safety net there that we think it is. But it's not a matter of anything to do that's a fault with Muslim women. Actually, studies show that women in general also have the same issues, where it's not really something that they think is that they should get into. And so there's all these movements now and all these initiatives to try and make women more financially literate, more kind of to take more of an active role in their finances. A lot of women are, even though there is a gender pay gap still, but they are, doing well. They are pursuing their careers. So this is actually something that's across the board in Australia, and potentially, across the world as well. So it's not something that's just Muslim women kind of, having to deal with. This is actually a whole kind of global, I guess, approach to women just not being supported through, school, through uni, giving them those skills to think strategically about their finances.
And making them believe that it is their role to think that way. Because like we said before, in the beginning of our podcast, there's a cultural dynamic. And I guess now it's proven that it's not just Muslim women with that cultural dynamic, but maybe ours have a little bit more contributing to it. But really, women in general, it's sort of like, oh, well, is this really my place to think about this? Or even am I actually qualified to think about this? Because if you don't even think it's your place, how are you going to then bring in that mentality that, no, I am qualified to even dab into this, let me dab into this, right? That confidence as well. Now, the,
Can I just say, sorry, can I just
yeah,
add
yeah.
something to that study? What was really interesting, and I guess is a good sign, was that of the participants of that study, 60% were women. So this already shows that for those who wanted to take this survey about their financial competency and literacy, it shows that women are showing interest in this. And that's a great sign, even though perhaps the results show that, their competency or their literacy level might be a bit lower. It still shows that they are taking that initiative. So I thought that was a really good thing to note about that study. And like, even though a lot of the things that they talk about in the study, it's more capturing the data. They don't really go into, say, the background to it as to why. And that's something that I think definitely needs further research.
And it's interesting because even in my field of work as an accountant, like I have female and male clients. I can't tell you, it's almost 100% that my female clients would say, they would like preface, they would put a disclaimer when they start with me and said, look, my finances are all over the place. And when I look at it objectively, it's not that bad at all. Like they've been conducting their business pretty well, but you won't hear a male come to me and say, hey, my finances are all over the place, even if it was. And just that, again, I think that's probably maybe research has already addressed that, but we need to kind of tackle this inner voice, I guess, as well, and say, no, no, we're ready for this, and there's a place for us in this particular realm. Let's talk about that a little bit more. Perceptions, community perception. So your research revealed a fascinating perception gap. So 93% of young Muslim men in Australia said they, drum roll please, support women's right to work. Yet the broader public assumed only 54% of Muslim men would be supportive. That is a huge perception gap. Now, how do these misperceptions affect the Muslim woman?
Yeah, look, I mean, again, this is just a very initial study. I was working on this with Dr. Elif and Shikara Hafalir and some other colleagues at UTS. And so she's in the business school there, and she's done other research in Saudi Arabia on similar, areas, and the results are quite interesting to compare. But just in terms of the Australian one, obviously this is just 93% of the participants, but that's a very high, that's a very high rate there, even among the participants, and these were Australian-born participants. So she made sure that the participants there, because it was about social norms and perceptions, so she wanted to make sure that she captured, that the group had at least been in Australia for a significant amount of time, having been born here, to be able to accurately reveal what sort of, the general perception among Australian Muslims. And so that statistic is really interesting, because it just really shows that disconnect between, again, the wider social perceptions about Muslims, and particularly male Muslims, and the actual opinions held by male Muslims. I guess, first of all, again, it's influenced by just, still the ongoing Islamophobia, the stereotypes that the general Australian society has about Muslim families, and even if, we talked about how Muslim women sort of feel that, the man is the main provider. Even, though perhaps in families and communities that has changed, the wider society probably still thinks that we have a very kind of, this traditional or, separation of roles, very gender roles based, duties in the family. So that's still something that hasn't progressed, or hasn't translated to awareness in the wider Australian society. And so therefore they clearly, the ones who, did the study, clearly still think that Muslim men want women to be at home, to just look after the children, to, take homemaker roles, and that they're not supportive or don't allow them to go out and work. And, for whatever reasons, they've got so many perceptions, I guess, and misperceptions about the community. But I guess another thing that came up in that same study that was that Muslim women. So the interesting part of that study was that it asked all these different groups: Muslim, non-Muslim, men, women, professionals and university students. And the data was aggregated, and it's still being in the writing up process at the moment. But the data was aggregated in a way that then further questions were, again, like you saw, so it's asking certain groups in that survey what they think. So even the Muslim men were asked, what do you think Muslim men would think about this? And then Muslim women said, were asked, what do you think Muslim men would think about this? So it was obviously looking at how all those different groups responded to these perceptions of how, what they think that this particular group of, Muslim men how they would answer it. And so for Muslim women who did believe that, and this again, who believed that perhaps Muslim men didn't support them working, but then also later on in the study, in the questions, it was how, if the society thought that Muslim men didn't support them, how would they? So there's quite a few elements to this. It's quite a fascinating study. So for Muslim women who felt that the wider workplace, agreed with, that Muslim men didn't support them, they were less likely, those ones in the study actually said that they were less likely to consider working. So this perception of how those workplaces, so they felt that perhaps in those workplaces they would be looked down upon, or they would be constantly questioned, or, they just felt like they would be uncomfortable being in those places where there's this perception that, you're not actually really supported to be here. And so even just in that study, it showed that for those women who thought, yep, the wider Australian society doesn't, they think that I'm not supported to go in, I probably would not want to work in those, workspaces, and again, that would perhaps restrict women to more, maybe family-based businesses or Muslim community sort of spaces, as opposed to for those women who perhaps wanted to go out and do other kinds of industries or passions that perhaps the Muslim community hasn't got a space set up for them. But yeah, there's really interesting research coming out that, I guess is just touching that tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more research to go into as to why is this the case, and then also how can we try to resolve these? What do we need to do to change these perceptions and these subsequent behaviors and decisions that people are making?
Because you want perception to be as close as possible to reality. Then then only can you make an informed decision. And to be honest, I remember being a baby, like a graduate auditor, and being in the same situation. Like, you think that because there's that perception, then you won't be given more important or like strategic work as well. So you just settle, and then you don't bring yourself. You don't believe you have a leverage in the negotiation table. Come performance review, you're just like, yes, I'm happy with my position. But actually, if you didn't have that, and nobody told me I was less anyways, mashallah, I worked with great co-workers, and it took time to find to convince myself that no, Remy, you can negotiate, you can ask for higher, for better portfolio, etc. Yeah, so it's definitely a contributing factor of how, if we even enter the workspace, and how we act in that realm. Now, there's also one more stats coming out of that article, and I want to touch on that. So 63% of Muslim university students that you interviewed expressed deep concern about reconciling professional ambitions with family responsibilities. Very obviously, this is something that I am not surprised at, and obviously compared to the general population, only 38% had that, inner conflict. So that obviously suggests that Muslim women feel this heightened pressure to choose between career or family. So I definitely resonate with this, but to be fair, I accept this as as a balancing act between my God-given role, mother, daughter, wife, with the extra tools, what I perceive as extra tools to serve the community. But this this perception of mine personally hasn't really impeded my ability to put aside wealth for myself, think about my retirement plan, think about investment, because I guess my line of work as well just has forced me to think about all of that. But now it seems that my personal experience is not what the general is not the experience of every Muslim woman out there. So it seems that there's a portion of our community that believes that it's an all or nothing situation. I either go and seek financial wealth, or I must then just basically, they believe that them seeking the financial wealth goes against them embracing their communal roles, that mother, daughter, wife role. How do we reconcile these sentiments? How do we give permission to the Muslim woman to embrace both roles with enthusiasm? And what does our deen teach us about balancing this act?
Well, I guess first of all, it is something that everyone has to decide for themselves. What is the right balance? Everyone has a different circumstance, but yes, it is something that the role of the mother is very highly respected, and a lot of Muslim women, do feel that if it was up to them or their husband being the stay-at-home parent, that they feel that okay, maybe I might be the better served. But then again, there are more cases of perhaps husbands deciding to also do that because the wife, say for example, is a gastroenterologist or something, and it just makes more financial sense for her. So again, it's not something that is probably like a very big shift, but there are those kind of discussions that are happening in families. And I guess, like I said before, there was, because of the cost of living crisis and because of the nature of Muslims usually have larger families than the average of, I don't know, one and a half. So we do need to be able to provide for our families. And, we're very conscious of being able to give them the best opportunities that we can, particularly for those from, migrant backgrounds. And, we've all heard the stories, when I was little, we didn't have this opportunity and you need to work hard and study hard and get,
Make the best of
progress
it.
well in life.
Yeah.
And so if, for Muslim women who, inshallah, if they have family support, that can take away, that can look after the children, then that not only helps financially, obviously, but also helps relieve some of that mum guilt, of I'm leaving my children. But, again, if they don't have that family support, or if women are single mothers, the fact that we do have access to childcare and in some cases can be quite, heavily subsidized, that is something that we're very lucky to have access to here in Australia. But I guess one aspect of, money and wealth and success that might impact our, those kind of, that's feelings of, should I do, should I pursue like the dunya, or should I think about just the akhirah, or, is something, I guess, is our relationship with money. So there's a lot of underlying emotional responses to money. And even though this might be the same across, other communities, but obviously in the Muslim community, there's very, we've had certain experiences from our childhood that influence the way in which we think about money and we deal with money, whether it's through, marriage, business endeavors, or, even sibling interactions. So, for example, for some Muslim women, it might have a negative association based on situations where, if say with their families starting out, maybe they moved from overseas, or maybe they just, didn't come from a very rich family. Money was something that was very hard. It caused arguments. There were sacrifices that had to be made. And therefore there's a sense of, but there's maybe in some families, it's like we don't pursue capitalism. We don't, because we need to just try to practice, what the Prophet and the Prophet ﷺ's time, and just, live simply. So, there's perhaps those approaches give a lot of charity. And then in other cases, money is viewed as a way of benefiting families and communities, and is seen as something, accumulating personal wealth is seen as something that is actually encouraged in the deen. So we've got so many examples of Muslim women in history who are actively involved in either working for money or using their wealth in strategic ways to benefit, again, their families and communities. So there's examples of obviously the Prophet ﷺ, supported some of his wives wanted to, make things, sell them. There were women who were actively involved in the marketplace. Umar radiallahu an, he actually appointed two women to be what's called the muhtasib, or the superintendents of the marketplaces, one in Mecca and one in Medina. The one in Medina was called Al-Shifa bint Abdullah, and the one in Mecca was Samra bint Nuhayk. And he actually even gave them powers, judicial and executive powers, that if they saw or any signs of cheating or business disputes or anything, they could actually make a decision about it, and he gives them, they had whips that they could whip people and the punishments. So they were given those responsibilities, in that financial sense, to manage and look after and oversee, that all these dealings in the marketplace were just and fair. And he wouldn't have given those women that, opportunities if they weren't financially capable, or they were not savvy enough to sort of see how transactions and trade and business, occurred. And then another example of Islamic history is, waqfs. A lot of wealthy women, and, in some cases, the wives of different sultans in the Ottoman period, they would use their inheritance, their ongoing maintenance, their mahr, to be able to make these waqfs to contribute and for longevity. Some of them were waqf khairi, which is like where they purchase, assets and create, like wells or soup kitchens, and then the proceeds of that, whether it's through the income or whether through the actual services of it, is for perpetuity. But they also would set up things called a waqf ahli, which is where they would purchase an asset and the income of that would support themselves and their daughters. And they would make their daughters be the managers of that waqf. So they were training their daughters to be aware of what how to distribute the finance. So it wasn't waqfs, even though, and it's great, we have things like Awqaf Australia now, where it's, people are starting to become a bit more aware of this very long-term institution that's in our heritage. It's not just the waqfs for community benefit. There was also waqfs called waqf ahli, which is a family waqf. And so these were situations where women would purchase assets, and then the income of that, or the proceeds of that, would be used to support themselves and their primarily their daughters. And their daughters would also be appointed as the managers of that. So it wasn't just that they were the recipients and they got this money. They were actively involved in that process of looking after, managing, distributing. And so it helped train, women to be conscious of what was happening with their wealth. Again, not coming back to today's day, we've got a lot of, like you said, a lot of Muslim women who are very highly educated. Sometimes that doesn't necessarily transfer into highly employed, because of, mainly Islamophobia and lots of challenges that they face. And again, perhaps perceptions and misperceptions about whether or not they would be, encouraged and supported by their better halves. But we also have to be aware that, as a Muslim community, we're still a young community here. Mostly second generation families. We've got obviously a lot of third generation, but we're still getting lots of first generation migrants, and families who have, in some cases, if they're lucky enough, they've come here with their wealth to pursue a better life. And in some cases, they've come here with nothing. They've had to leave all their wealth behind and start from scratch. So, for example, when I was on the board of the Muslim Women's Centre for Human Rights, there are a lot of issues facing, new arrivals and Muslim women. We really were looking at ways to help them with, because financial insecurity was a significant problem, and also their sense of, perhaps they were here on their husband's visa. And they weren't, a PR, or they didn't have a settled visa for themselves. So that was something that perhaps some, unfortunately, some husbands could use to their advantage and say, look, you need to stay with me. Otherwise, if you even think about, leaving me, you will have to be sent back home. sometimes that's obviously not correct, but women just didn't know. They were really at the whim of, whoever was supporting them financially here. And so for, newly arrived migrants, refugee women, they're very often reliant on their husband's income, and they have very low levels of financial literacy and engagement. So we've got to think about all the different aspects of our communities and how we can help support them at all their different levels of where they're at.
And I think it's beautiful that we have so many examples to really draw from in our own Islamic tradition. And then that can kind of, I think for our Muslim women who have that all or nothing kind of mentality, one of the most difficult things to reconcile is, well, if I hoard this wealth, is it then going to be making me a person of this dunya and not of the akhirah? But like all the examples you've just said, they were very directed in their niyyah, in their intention. Yes, they accumulated wealth, but they made sure it was some sort of investment for their akhirah. And that ilm, like that knowledge, how the mother is training their daughters. Technically, investment training. That's what it's basically literally here's money. Then let's train you on how to make good investment decisions, right? And
Yeah.
a community, society can never lose when you have financial literate women. We're not saying, I don't think any of us are saying women need to necessarily leave their roles as mother, daughter, wife. But ilm, knowledge, is a necessity in our deen. And that's so
Absolutely.
empowering.
And also, and this idea of wealth, management, I think it's about, well, what's the end goal? You know what I mean? Like, yes, like you said, there's so much, if a woman's successful, she's doing well, there's so having this idea of wealth growth can actually help to free up your time to not have to go and work to get that income every day. It can be a passive income.
Yes.
And then what can you do with your time instead? You can use it to spend time with your family. You can use it to contribute to community, endeavors. You can use it to again, choose a charity that's not coming out of your savings. It's actually coming out of these, investments. And that's something that is a long-term thing, because if so many people, we're a very giving community. We give so much, and so many mosques have, been built on the gold and the contributions of women. Women have been, mashallah, so generous. Like I said, giving maybe even their own mahr, to contribute. So how can you, but this is not like, giving donations is not something that is a long-term strategy. We want to have systems in place where people can, the community can survive after we've passed away. And also then through those contributions, you also get sadaqah jariyah. So you're actually also contributing towards your own akhirah by, setting up these, by thinking about ways in which your money can your money work, and if you have a strategy for it, then you don't have to make that kind of conflict of the decision, I'm giving up one, I have to choose one or the other. It can allow you that time and opportunity to be able to pursue those Islamic courses, to go study in that way, to be able to pursue the things that you've always wanted to do.
Mashallah, mashallah. Let's pivot our conversation towards your current role as an authorized credit representative with Amanah Islamic Finance. Firstly, can you explain what you do?
So essentially, I work as what would be known as a finance broker. So, for example, I don't know, it's equivalent to like Aussie Home Loans or Mortgage Choice or something, except that with Amanah Islamic Finance, we only work with Sharia compliant funders, and therefore we offer Sharia compliant products. And these have been given the stamp of approval by our global Sharia certification board. So they are a very gold standard in terms of their expertise and their ability to check thoroughly all of our agreements and contracts. So essentially, I just have conversations with people if they want to, to start the process. I start with just a phone call. find out what the goals are, what their situation is. Do you already have a property? Are you looking to get into the market? Do you have a property and you want to leverage that to get, an investment property if you've got enough equity? Do you want to, build a granny flat for your parents if you have a big, big plot of land? So all these things sort of look into what's your goal? And then I would do some questions around servicing and just ask about income, how big your family is, how long you've been working in this role. Are you, PAYG? Are you self-employed? And then that way I can find, the right product fit. And then I would, and again, this is all just, no obligation. I can just do it over the phone, and I give you the options that you have in terms of your servicing, how much you can get with this funder, with that funder, and all the different benefits and different sort of, facilities that they have. Some have online banking, offset, redraw accounts. Some have certain promotions that might pop up every now and then that you can go up to 90%, finance without paying that lender's mortgage insurance, which is normally after anything above 80%. So I go through the process and just explain, what all the different options are, what all the different costs are, if you need to pay the lender's mortgage insurance, and then how much your stamp duty will be, and that kind of thing. And then, from there, then customers can say if they want to go ahead with it or not. And then, inshallah, we start the process. And so I'm there all the way through. If they have any questions, I've got, and I find, it's really great when I have female customers who really ask a lot of questions. And one thing they say is, I'm so sorry, I have another question. And I'm like, no, I love questions. I love questions, because that means then that you are fully aware of what you're getting yourself into, and you are comfortable, because there's nothing worse than, it's like asking, if you're a teacher asking a class, so does anyone have any questions? And nobody has any idea what you've just taught them, but they all sit there because they're like, I don't want to look like the dumb person. I don't want to ask the question, but I had no idea, so I'm just going to wing it. So when people ask questions, that actually means, okay, I understand that bit, but there's this bit that I'm not sure. Can you just explain this bit a bit better? That means I know, okay, fantastic. They really get what is going on, and they want to know, and they understand. And if they're not sure, then I will explain further. So I really, and I guess my first degree was in teaching. So I worked at a number of Islamic schools. And so I really, I can really see the benefits of, asking questions. Please, I encourage them. Any question you have, just shoot me an email, shoot me a WhatsApp, just, send it to me, and I will get back to you. And so that's something that I really, encourage for Muslim women, is that you go out there, you ask questions, because it's interesting, because, when we have a medical issue, we will go to the doctor, and we have no problem going to the doctor and saying, okay, this is my situation. What is going on? But for some reason, and I don't know if it's just the way that, even, and like I said, even, in, just general Australian society, women also have issues with, kind of learning about finance, is this sort of mental block of, I don't really want to ask questions, about, finance, because for some reason I should know this, but it is a specific area, you know what I mean? And we're not embarrassed when we go to the doctor and say, okay, I have no idea what this spot is. Can you tell me what this spot is? But if we want to talk to someone about finances, it's like you said, they sort of start by going, I don't really know, I'm financially illiterate. I'm actually really bad with this. I don't know. And it's like, well, you know what? You've made the first step. You're talking to me. So that's great. So don't worry about that. You're here. Let's just get stuck into it. But it's this kind of sense of almost like embarrassment or shame that, I should know this.
Like an inferiority complex, isn't it?
Yes, but you know what? Most people don't. And that's, I guess, just a nature of, we learn things that are relevant to us, that we pursue professions that we enjoy or that we're very lucky to get into. And then we know that. And so we're not expected to know everything. But for some reason, there's still this sort of sense of, I should know this, and I don't, and I'm just, so it's like kind of like, this, like you said, you were talking, about your customers and how they sort of almost sort of put themselves down, before they even, and when you look at it, you're like, actually, no, you're doing a really great job.
Yeah, like their default is, I don't know, so forgive me. But And that's the thing, like, you know how it's funny that you brought up the doctor example, because usually, I mean, not say usually, but many times I've got a lot of doctor friends, and in fact, they're faced with, you know, patients who believe it's their right, you know, and rightfully so, their right to know every single thing, and they will demand it, right? But then when it comes to finances, they're like, I'm at your mercy. But why? You have a right to get this financial advice, to gain financial knowledge from any expert that you have access to.
Yep, yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's so true, isn't it? Yeah. So I think it's just this mindset,
Mm.
perhaps, that we just need to change. It's like, you know what? There are experts in the field like yourself, myself, you know, people who are in real estate, people who can tell you about money and investments and properties and strategy. There's financial advisors. There's all kinds of people out there. So take advantage, use them, and question them.
Yeah.
Yeah, their word is not, you know, like solid in terms of, you know, yes, there might be something that we may not have thought of, or, you know, that you might say,
Mm.
oh, well, what about this and what about that? Or but so it's something that is definitely ask and be completely comfortable with it, because the worst thing is that, you know, you feel as a customer, you feel like you're being kind of pushed into something.
Yeah.
You know, like buying a car, you're pushed into, you know, by a car salesperson or something, but you need to be sure 100% that this is the right product for you.
And because you spoke about your female clients, I'm wondering now, when you have male clients, so male versus female, is there a significant difference? Maybe there's no significant difference in how they steer that home financing conversation.
Hmm. Well, it's really interesting because most of my male clients have been quite confident. Not only one, and it was something because I noticed how many of my Muslim female clients prefaced their conversation with me with those kind of like, oh, I'm not good, I'm this, I'm that, you know, kind of, and I had to just kind of like spend a bit of time just reassuring them, it's okay, you're here, let's get into it. Only one of my male clients so far has said that, and it was really like quite striking, because I was like, wow, okay, so that means most of my other male clients are just, yep, let's just get into it.
Hmm.
And alhamdulillah, on the whole, because I deal with just Muslim clients, you know, they've been very respectful and, you know, very supportive. But, you know, I guess, you know, in every community, because it is such a male dominated job and in an industry, you know, I have had a couple which, you know, unfortunately they'll sort of question what I've provided to them. They want to use my broker calculator to work it out for themselves, you know, and I've been trained in how to use it because they're all so different, right? And then they might want to speak to my manager, and I say, look, you know, if there's anything that I can't, because they say, oh, can I speak to your manager because you might not be able to help me with this, you know? And then so I say, look, let me answer it, and then if you're not happy with that, then you can speak to my manager.
Mm.
That's perfectly fine. But I think on the whole, after they've spoken to me and after, you know, I tell them, look, I'm sorry, I can't give you access to, you know, my tools and my calculators because you have to be an accredited broker and have to have training in it. Then they sort of, okay, yeah, they understand. But you know, it is, you know, obviously a bit disappointing when that happens, but I'm sure that in very kind of male dominated domains that a lot of women, you know, would face this. I mean, I was just looking at, the general broker population in Australia, and at the moment there's only 27% are women. So it is
MashaAllah.
still a very heavily
Mm.
male dominated area.
And that's general
And
Australian
yeah, that's just
population.
brokers across Australia, yes.
Mm. Oh, subhanallah.
And yeah, so but alhamdulillah, like, you know, I guess it's just you know, me, and it's interesting because I've been in perhaps more female dominated environments in the past in the education sector, you know, and then moving into university that like perhaps that's a bit more you know, you know, on par. You know, men and women are generally, you know, in the education sector, but to move into something that's so kind of male dominated, it was a bit of a you know, like a change, and it's something that, you know, I think inshallah it is a good opportunity, and like yourself, for women who are getting into these very male dominated roles, it breaks down that barrier for women to be able to start asking questions, because inshallah I hope that we are someone that they feel more comfortable talking to, that they, you know, it just reduces that one, you know, one aspect of it that kind of will hold them back from wanting to learn more.
Now, so drawing from your variety of experience, so you're an academic, you are in the front line of helping people get home financing. What is that one, let's say, financial literacy gap, that you can see between male and female clients? Because obviously we're addressing financial literacy in Muslim women. What is something that you see? Yes, you know what, what there's a gap between what my Muslim male client does know, and that is it, and what the Muslim women client knows.
Mm.
If that
I
makes
mean, I guess, yeah. I guess the first thing that stands out is just, I guess, the thing that we've been talking about, which is the confidence, and just overcoming that sense of, I should know this, but I don't, and just kind of accepting that, you know what, if it's not something that you've been taught or that you had a passion for or an interest in, why would you know? And I think, perhaps because of, again, that expectation that the husbands are, the financial providers, they're just expected to try and think about, oh, you need to get a home for your family, you need this, you need that. So they're just pushed into it, and they kind of have to kind of try to figure it out. But I think, in terms of, if women are, interested in, or they are in the finance space, they have that technical knowledge. So, for example, in the study that we talked about with Dr. Mahmoud Nathi, so women did have lower rankings overall in their financial literacy, but in some of the questions about Islamic finance in particular, women actually ranked higher. So they were
MashaAllah.
aware of a lot of the fiqh rulings. So
MashaAllah.
perhaps, we're more studious in terms of that Islamic knowledge, and what are the musharaka, murabaha, mudaraba, that kind of thing. But maybe, because we feel like, oh, it's something that we need to learn as Muslims, but the conventional finance, what the KRBA cash rate, or if we have this LVR, or if we need to get the lender's mortgage insurance, that's like, oh well, maybe my husband or my father or my brother, or will take care of. So I guess all they need to do is just switch on to, what, all financial information is actually useful. But yeah, I thought it was worth mentioning that in terms of that fiqh information, women actually scored better in terms of, the actual technical stuff.
Mashallah. And I guess this is just from my personal thinking. Again, you said it's because we believe that deen is very important and we take that upon ourselves. So we know that's our individual responsibility. Now we just need to marry up the fact that, yes, the Islamic side is your personal responsibility, but to be able to practice that in real life is also your personal responsibility, right? Just following up from that, what would you personally recommend to be the top 3 resources that women can go out to find and to improve their financial literacy?
Oh, look, I think resources in terms of, like, there's obviously a lot that you can go out and try and read, but again, if you want to make these decisions and you want to do it properly, seek out experts. You know what I mean? So seek out a financial advisor. Financial advisor would be your first step in terms of, okay, if you've got a lot of savings, and then they would be able to tell you, okay, what's your risk appetite? Do you want to go into long-term, low risk, or are you looking at sort of short-term, more higher risk? And they will sort of go through whether you want to get into property or whether you want to invest in certain things. And if so, what aspects of, investment would you want to do? And then obviously they would look at all the Sharia compliant, offers that are available. And mashallah, we do have a lot more services and more opportunities that are being set up. Again, you need to do your due diligence. You need to look at them, make sure that, these initiatives and so on all have their Australian Financial Services license, their AFSL. Make sure that they are properly qualified and properly. So while the financial advisor can give you advice, when you want to go into, these investments, and like I mentioned, unfortunately, there have been some that have collapsed recently, and those who perhaps have been underperforming in previous years, we need to, if you're going to put your money, it's not just a set and forget thing, initially, before you even put your money in, you need to check and find out, are they legally, are they properly registered? Are they, can you, if they're not, under ASIC or, the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, they don't have the AFSL, then you might not be able to get your money back, if they do fall through. So, there's lots, and your financial advisor, again, ask lots of questions, say, look, would this be something that is, there's nothing that's ever safe, to put your money into, but what it would be like in terms of high or low risk. I guess other resources would be accountants, so such as yourself, who can help you with really, managing all the things like, helping, get with your tax, how investments can help that, and how you can, set up your budgets, or how you can, manage your income and split it into certain different ways to really kind of set you up for, building that savings pool. And then I guess the third thing would be, if you're looking to get into the property market, it would be having those resources there. So it would be knowing good real estate agents, having a good broker, and maybe even a buyer's agent. I've noticed that there's quite a few now who are buyer's agents who are helping Muslims looking for investment properties all around Australia. While you might know your area, or you might know where your family is living or whatever, and you might be a bit aware of, how the property prices are rising, but you need to tap into these experts to be able to give you really solid information about where, would be, the growth areas, or what are you looking for, like a big plot of land that you can subdivide and then perhaps, build duplex and sell off, or, are you looking for something, like I said, with a granny flat that you can buy, build a granny flat for your parents who might want to downsize and live with you. So there's all these different scenarios, but alhamdulillah, I think we definitely have building our capacity as a community, and we are definitely able to have these services available to us. Make them.
So the first one was financial advisors, then your accountants, and then again, because a big part of investment in Australia is property, get a reliable real estate agent or buyer's agent, as you mentioned just now. Jazakallah for that. So alhamdulillah, as we wrap up, let me play the devil's advocate for a moment here, Dr. Anisa. If I'm a Muslim woman who's in a stable marriage, I'm financially comfortable, I've got some savings, why should I bother? Why should I spend time learning about financial literacy, learning all these jargons that are going to take me 2 hours to understand? Why should I even think about wealth building when my husband has that all settled? What's the real so what here?
Mm-hmm. I think, I guess we've covered quite a lot of this already, but I think it's just for you, and, while you may be happy and settled and you might think that everything's all good and handled by others, it is something that, particularly if you're on, for example, if you're on the title or you're on the finance or you're contributing monetarily to whatever it is, whether they're an investment, like through property or your own property that you're living in, whether it's, contributing to some, investment fund, or where, if think about it, I guess, if your husband is doing all that, his wealth will grow. I already mentioned about how the gender pay gap, and how we have a parent, like we have this, what's called a parenthood penalty, where essentially women tend to be the main caregivers and take time off work. Husbands and men will continue and will expand and increase in terms of their career progression, and obviously in terms of their superannuation, and so there's all these flow-on effects. So we're already at a disadvantage. So we have to be strategic, and if our husband is doing things, just if he's investing and getting a property, ideally, we would be also on the title of that property, so we can get, whether the rental income, or we can get the share of it, if at the time of either death or divorce. But if he's doing it all on his own money, think about it. Their money will be growing, and ours will just be sitting and actually shrinking because of inflation. And as a community, and I think we've sort of touched on this, as a community, how can that money that we have not just benefit our families? And obviously our priority is thinking about our families, because the hand above is better than the hand below. We want to be financially stable to help others. How can we help the community if we are not financially stable in our own right as a family? We can bring other family members, from overseas, or we can support them, or we can send money to them. But also, as our parents get older, we have to think about not just, how we fund our children's marriages, and all the, expenses in helping them set up their lives. But we may also have to look after our parents. And that, again, is a continuation of that caring. So if we can use our wealth in a way that we can be strategic and get that passive income, like I said, it will free up our time to be able to do all this. And it will help prevent us from these financial shocks. And the financial shocks can happen at any point in our lives. And if we're not prepared for it, if we don't have an emergency fund, or if we don't have, some extra savings that are just parked somewhere, when, if something significant happens to the family, if your husband loses his job, or, you have, an accident, and then you need to take on more responsibilities. There are so many things that, they talk about how we're only 3 paychecks away from homelessness. With the cost of living crisis, we constantly have to think about, okay, how are we doing more with our money rather than just saving and getting by? And thinking about these sort of long-term, approaches to our wealth. And that, yes, we have so many examples in our history, in our heritage, of ways to grow that. But it's not always just about for us. It is about for the longevity of the Muslim community. And if we have our growth, and our growth accumulates as a community, we don't have to just rely on donations and funding and everything. That is just this constant ongoing. We can have systems that are set in place to be able to provide income, to have that scholarships, to have that funding, to help, support, mothers who are trying to escape abusive relationships. We have all these ways in which to look after, members and the vulnerable in our community, which is the focus that, we need to have. So, and also just, as a community, we're not just always relying on just getting by. We can, as a community that's wealthy, and we can, I guess, see how wealth for other communities helps them in terms of lobbying. It helps them in terms of advocacy. It helps them in terms of being able to make, influence law and influence, systems in this country to be able to benefit not just our community, but all communities. So wealth is not something that, we should shy away from. It's something that has a lot of possibilities and potential. And as women, we are part of that, and we can contribute to that, and we can look after ourselves, our families, and our communities in the process.
MashaAllah, Jazakallah for that. It made me think about how every Muslim, women or men, have different things to bring to the table. So the men might think of in other infrastructure, but then because we're women and we're so close to children, for example, we will remember educational infrastructure, etc. So if we can work together, but working together requires the woman to then also have exactly what we're talking about today, a higher rate of financial literacy. Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much, Dr. Anisa. Honestly, it has been such an illuminating conversation. I do hope this gives benefit to our community at large. We've learned that while challenges exist, I believe your optimism has really brought to light what we can do with what we currently have, and we should be taking charge of that. Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real honor to be here. And I really, inshallah, hope that your podcast just keeps going in success. And I'm looking forward to a lot of the other really exciting presenters that you are going to have on there.
Inshallah. Ameen. Thank you so much.